This is Glow in the Dark Radio. The science fiction podcast, with original independent science fiction, written and performed by Mike Luoma, with music by Kevin MacLeod. The Vatican Assassin Trilogy and The Adventures of Alibi Jones by Mike Luoma are available in ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook wherever you find your books online. Get links and details at glowinthedarkradio.com. This is the Science Fiction Podcast, Glow in the Dark Radio. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma, and I've got part 2 of Chapter 12 of Alibi Jones coming up on this episode. Alibi Jones, Kit the Dakhur, and Piccolo the scumbag bounty hunter, as well as Katie now, who they've just rescued. All just boarded their ship. They're on an alien outpost where they discovered a human and his Eldred minions doing horrible experiments on kidnapped humans. The why wasn't clear. Alibi had to put his old teacher, Miss K, out of her misery. He'd followed the trail of her kidnappers all the way to this outpost, but he was too late to save her. She'd already been experimented upon and partially vivisected. Now she's at peace. But can Alibi Jones and company escape the outpost? We'll be finding out in part 2 of Chapter 12, coming up on Glow in the Dark Radio. Don't have a lot in the way of book news to report, so I just want to say a big thank you to my patrons for supporting this podcast, and encourage you to do so if you can. It's $2, $5, or $10 a month, which you pledge through Patreon, Patreon. So if you head to patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio, you can find out more about becoming a Glow in the Dark Radio patron and helping to support the podcast. You'll get episodes early. Last week's was early. This week's, I think, is going to be early. I think you're hearing this early if you're a patron. And patrons also got an exclusive short story a couple of weeks ago that's only for patrons so far. It's one I wrote about 5 years ago for a Balticon writing challenge called A Jar. Kind of a supernatural suspense thing. And that is just available to patrons right now. So if you want to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio for $2, $5, or $10 a month. And of course, you'll have my gratitude. And hopefully I'll get you some cool stuff early and exclusively, because that's what I try to do for patrons. And again, thank you to my current patrons, my handful who actually help keep this show going. Thank you. We're going to get into part 2 of Chapter 12 of Alibi Jones next on Glow in the Dark Radio.
Wake up, go to work. Work. Come home, eat dinner, rot your brain out, go to bed, lather, rinse, repeat. Are you tired of an old humdrum life? Tired of things that just weigh you down and depress you? Wouldn't you rather just focus on things that are awesome? Tune into Nutty Bites. Find out what's awesome. Nutty Bites, nimlas.org/blog.
Now here's part 2 of Chapter 12 of Alibi Jones on Glow in the Dark Radio. Alibi sits down in the pilot's chair and fires up the cruiser's power plant. As he checks in with Safe on the comm, Alibi discovers that the safe ship the mediation service is sending should be here within the hour. Their cruiser should be back at Cat's Eye by then. He goes through the pre-flight checklist and gets the ship ready to take off. Kit sits in the co-pilot's seat. Piccolo and Katie eye each other warily from passenger seats in the row behind them on the bridge.
"Did you see this?"
Kit asks Alibi. He throws a comm readout up on the heads-up display. "What's that?" Alibi asks.
"A distress beacon,"
Kit says. "Really? Why didn't we pick it up immediately?"
"It is not a normal frequency,"
Kit tells him.
"Certainly not a Solar Alliance frequency."
"Whose is it?"
"I do not know. It originates here. Masakov must have triggered it."
"And we're off," Alibi declares, changing the subject by announcing the ship's liftoff.
"That beacon," Kit trails off. "Who do you suppose it is calling?"
"Uh-oh," Alibi says. The tactical display in front of him is filling up with little yellow triangles. He turns to Kit as he puts the tactical display on the heads-up display. He looks back at the display, pointing. "Them? Who are they?" Katie asks, leaning forward trying to read the display. Alibi is just discovering that himself. "Tekta," he tells the others. "Looks like Masakov called in his trading partners for backup." "Damn, sure are a lot of them," Piccolo observes. Alibi tries to call any safe ships nearby. "They're jamming our communication," he says aloud as he realizes he's not getting through. He begins angling the ship away from the massing Tekta armada. "Let's fire up the transspace engines and get out of here," Piccolo shouts excitedly. Yeah, Alibi agrees, but he's thinking more than he's listening to what Piccolo is saying. "Yeah, ordinarily that's what I'd be doing, but..." He trails off, losing the thought as he tries to figure out what the Tekta weapons range might be so he can pilot around it. "The people," Katie says, finishing for Alibi. "He's not going to just leave those people down there for the Tekta to capture all over again," she chastises Piccolo. Kit begins to understand what Alibi is doing at the same time Katie does.
"Delaying tactics?"
the Catman asks Alibi. "Delaying and distracting," Alibi adds. "I hope. Their ships are arrayed in orbit in kind of a bent cylinder formation. I'm going to fly in just beyond weapons range. Come in from below and to their right. Then I'll bring us back over and around them, and down, like so," he says, tracing a loose spiral in the air with his finger. "Yeah, like so." Piccolo imitates him, twirls his finger in a loose spiral in the air next to his ear to wordlessly infer that Alibi's crazy.
"Like a Mobius strip,"
Kit comments.
"Elegant, but I am not sure it is practical."
"Guess we'll see," Alibi says, as he finishes plotting the course. The ship begins diving towards the lower right side of the oncoming Tekta forces. Alibi checks and then double-checks the range he's keeping between himself and the nearest Tekta ship.
"There is a problem,"
Kit says, as Alibi watches for a sign of Tekta weapons lock. "What?" Alibi asks.
"I do not think they have noticed us," Kit observes. "It is hard to be a distraction if they do not see you."
"Fire something at them," Alibi orders. Kit merely looks at him.
"Really?"
the Catman finally asks.
"As you wish."
He looses a volley of ineffectual fire from the cruiser's cannons. The yellow triangles on the heads-up tactical display begin shifting in their direction.
Ah, that did the trick. Now they notice us.
Alibi adjusts the ship's trajectory to accommodate the Tekta shift in position and keep the cruiser out of their weapons range. As they come up around behind the opposition, many of the Tekta ships are forced to turn around to attempt pursuit. This confuses their ranks, as Alibi hoped it would. "Fire at him again!" Alibi calls over to Kit. Kit obliges with more meaningless fire from the cruiser's cannons. It's enough to shift a few more ships in their direction. Alibi pushes the cruiser over the Tekta forces and doubles back to his start point, slightly further out than where he began due to the changing position of the Tekta. They turn again to follow his movements. Soon entire wings of the enemy armada are in the firing line of other wings, facing each other instead of Alibi's cruiser. "I think it's working!" Alibi exclaims. Beep, 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 beep. A red light is flashing across the heads-up display. Alibi has brought them in too close. One of the Tekta ships has managed to fix a firing solution on them. Boom thing! They're rocked sideways as the cruiser's shields absorb a blast from a nearby Tekta warship. Alibi scans the ship's displays, but the damage is minimal. They are still far enough away from the enemy to render the blast ineffectual. He tries to move them further away from the Tekta. A flash on the display lets him know the ships are still firing at them, but missing. Alibi steers the cruiser down beneath the Tekta positions and begins heading away from the planet entirely. An explosion flares among the Tekta. 2 ships have collided. Alibi's crazy, looping maneuvers have thrown their fleet into chaos. Alibi brings their ship around to face the fleet and the planet from the other side.
Trans-space signature developing, Kit tells him. Something else is coming this way.
A large, safe transport ship and 4 Stinger ship escorts emerge from transspace nearly on top of them.
This is Starship Promethea of the Solar Alliance Interplanetary Force. We have Solar Alliance citizens on the planetoid in this system who have requested emergency extraction. As this system is part of the old Eldred expanses, this planetoid is designated neutral territory under the agreements between the Solar Alliance and the Tekta. Any attempt to interfere with or delay our rescue of Solar Alliance citizens will be considered an act of war. Please vacate this system.
A Tekta voice hisses over the speaker, immediately translated.
We are also responding to a distress call,
the Tekta commander says.
We, too, would regard any interference with hostility. Therefore, we cannot vacate this system. Then stand aside while we complete our mission,
the safe commander says over the open comm.
We will then leave and you can attend to yours. We have an emergency situation. I do not see,
the Tekta commander begins to hiss, but stops. Another 6 safe ships appear out of transspace.
Now I do see. We will stand aside,
the Tekta says, backing down. The Tekta ships begin to reassemble their formation as they move away from the safe ships and the planetoid. The safe ships move into orbit. The small Tekta fleet stands by at a safe distance. Keeping the universe safe once again, Alibi jokes. No one else on the bridge laughs. The 10 safe ships show up on the bridge's heads-up display as glowing white dots, moving towards the yellow glowing symbolic mass of the planetoid. Alibi watches them move in. Can we go now? Piccolo asks, breaking the silence. We can, Alibi says. Already have the jump plotted and ready. He fires up the cruiser's transspace engines, and they flash out of the system. In transspace, Alibi breathes a sigh of relief and finally relaxes. The short transspace transition ends, and they flash back into normal space about an hour's distance out from Ceres Central. The asteroid field around Ceres shifts. Sometimes you can come out of transspace fairly close to the solar system's largest asteroid. Other times, like now, there are too many rocks around to plot a transspace point any closer. Alibi sets a course to bring them into the colony. He engages the autopilot and leans back in the pilot's seat. Can you keep an eye on things? Alibi asks Kit. I want to grab a nap, okay?
Not a problem,
Kit tells him. Alibi nods off for what seems like no time, but when he wakes up, they're over halfway to Ceres. Alibi looks back. Neither Piccolo nor Katie is sitting back where they had been. Kit, you seen the other 2?
No. I have been making small adjustments to our course and guiding our ship in towards Ceres Central. I did notice they were gone a short time ago.
Flash! Laser rifle fire inside the ship.
Hey!
Alibi hears Piccolo on the ship's internal comm.
Help! Hey!
Flash! Piccolo comes running, stumbling up onto the bridge. She's trying to kill me! He shouts as he tries to hide in a corner. Katie appears on the bridge, laser rifle in hand, a crazy gleam in her eyes. Where is he? She asks, a disturbing primal edge in her voice. In one swift, smooth motion, Alibi rises up out of his seat, eases up next to Katie, and grabs the rifle. A second later, he stands staring her down, the laser rifle in his hands. Stop shooting up my ship, he shouts at her. Ever hear of explosive decompression? You could have killed us all! She locks eyes with him, crazed. Then calm returns to her gaze. He's not taking me back with him, she says to Alibi, pointing past him to Piccolo. No, he's not. He won't. I won't let him, Alibi promises her. Go sit down, we're almost there. Katie sits back down behind Alibi's pilot chair. Piccolo edges into his seat. Alibi takes the rifle with him as he sits back down. Kit looks over at Alibi.
Do you want to take the ship in?
He asks, as if nothing had happened. Yeah, I'll take the helm. Thank you, Kit. Alibi brings the ship in towards Ceres Central's port. They're assigned a berth, and he maneuvers the cruiser into the station. There's little traffic now, but the safe ships carrying the victims and their escorts will be arriving here soon. As their cruiser settles into its berth, Alibi gets a report.
The safe ships have rescued all of the kidnap victims. They've left the planetoid and its system to the Tech-Ta. On the planetoid, Tech-Ta forces land and begin surveying the scene. Inside the dark lab, the drooling Hulk, pinned to the wall by metal straps, suddenly looks alert. A nimbus of crackling blue energy surrounds him, enveloping the man. He looks around as if in pain, stretching and squirming. The energy field around him intensifies. A look of grim intelligence crosses his face. As the energy field begins to dissipate, the man stretches and tests his bindings. He strains against the metal straps, and they snap, releasing his arms and legs. He unbuckles the metal strap around his waist and walks a few tentative steps. A smile crosses the brute's face. He is not drooling anymore. Yes, much better.
That was Part 2 of Chapter 12 of Alibi Jones, part of the Adventures of Alibi Jones Chronological Omnibus on Glow-in-the-Dark Radio. What just happened there, eh? Big drooling guy suddenly much better? Well, Alibi Jones and company are now safely away. Piccolo's lucky to be alive. We'll see what shakes out from the mission as they return to Ceres Central in Part 1 of Chapter 13 on our next episode. Again, a big thank you to patrons who help keep this podcast going, and my encouragement to you to become a patron if you can. You can do so for $2, $5, or $10 a month at patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. And that's the place to go if you want to get more information about all this. And again, thank you to those of you who are patrons already. That is all for this week. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma. Thank you again for listening to Glow in the Dark Radio. Glow in the Dark Radio. This podcast presentation is copyright 2023 by Michael F. Luoma and is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License, CC by NCND 4.0. Music by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at Incompetech.com. Mike's books are available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook, wherever you find books online. Get links and more details at glowinthedarkradio.com and mikeluoma.com. This has been a presentation of Glow in the Dark Radio.